There's a small graveyard at the edge of Greenwood County, South Carolina, a forgotten field where the wind never stops moving. Locals say it used to be part of an old plantation that burned down before the Civil War. But if you stand there long enough, if you listen closely through the rustle of pine and clay, you'll hear it. The sound of someone knocking, faintly, from under the ground. Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. In 1852, this place was called Rosewood Hollow, a name now wiped from most maps. What few records survive speak of a slave girl known only as Annie, age 14. She was said to be small, quiet, with a soft stutter and one lazy eye that made her a target of cruel fascination. Her mother died during childbirth. Her father was sold away. She lived mostly alone, working in the house of her owner, a man named Thomas Bellamy, known for his charm among the townsmen and his sadism among his slaves. Bellamy had one rule in his home. No slave was to speak after dark. He believed the dead could hear their voices and come for them. But one night, in the dead heat of August, someone heard Annie whispering, to no one. When confronted, she said she'd been talking to her mother. That was enough to seal her fate. 3 days later, she was declared dead. The plantation doctor signed a cause, heat sickness. She was buried the same day behind the house, in a wooden coffin nailed shut before sundown. But witnesses claimed they heard something from that grave the next night. A sound that froze every man who heard it, a voice crying out from beneath the earth. What happened next would turn the Bellamy plantation into a cursed name, and more than a century later, her grave would still bleed water when it rained. By morning, the plantation was silent. The overseers said it was just the wind, or the shifting of the coffin in the soil. But Bellamy's wife, Clara, swore she heard her name being called, softly, through the window, in a girl's trembling voice. When she told her husband, he struck her and forbade her to speak of it again. The slaves refused to go near the grave. They whispered that Annie had been buried alive, punished by mistake, and that her soul could not find its way out. One older woman, a midwife named Betsy Crow, said she'd warned Bellamy days before that Annie was not dead. She had seen her body twitch when they closed the coffin. She'd tried to open it again, but Bellamy had pulled her away. That night, the knocking returned. 3 slow raps, followed by a pause. The same pattern, over and over, like a heartbeat struggling to stop. Those who dared to listen said the sound came from beneath the oak tree that marked Annie's grave. One slave, a boy named Elijah, placed his ear to the dirt and fainted within seconds. When he came to, he was crying, saying she was calling for her mother. Bellamy ordered the grave dug up, not out of guilt, but to silence the talk. When they opened it, what they saw changed the color of every face there. Annie's body was twisted, her fingernails torn bloody, her mouth frozen mid-scream. There were scratches on the inside of the coffin lid. She had tried to claw her way out. The plantation doctor claimed her body had convulsed in death, a natural occurrence. But Betsy Crow spat on the ground and said, no, she woke up in her grave. From that night on, the Bellamy home was never quiet. Doors opened on their own. The rocking chair in Annie's old room moved at night. The family's youngest child claimed to see a girl in the hallway whispering, I'm still here. And then, one night, Thomas Bellamy himself began talking in his sleep, calling out for forgiveness from a voice no one else could hear. By autumn, the Bellamy plantation had become a place people crossed the road to avoid. The air around the main house felt heavy, thick, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Animals refused to drink from the well, and the Bellamy's dogs barked endlessly at the spot where Annie had been buried. Clara Bellamy, once the polished image of Southern gentility, began wasting away. Servants said she wouldn't sleep in her own bedroom anymore. She started waking in the kitchen, or out in the fields, barefoot, her nightgown soaked with dew. She told Betsy Crow that every night she saw the same dream. Annie standing beside her bed, staring, her mouth full of dirt, Bellamy himself grew crueler, angrier. He fired the overseer and took to beating the men himself. He ordered Annie's grave to be sealed with stones, then sprinkled salt around it. He told the slaves if anyone spoke her name again, they'd join her. But still, the whispering continued. In the hallways, in the walls, in the trees outside. One night in late November, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked over the house, and lightning struck the oak that shaded Annie's grave. The next morning, half of it lay split and smoking. The roots had pulled up the soil, exposing the edge of the coffin. That's when Bellamy ordered it burned. He called his men and told them to drag the box into the barn. But none of them would touch it, not even for money. Finally, he did it himself, splashing kerosene and striking a match. As the flames rose, witnesses said they heard a scream. Not from Bellamy, not from the fire, but from the ground itself. And when the barn roof collapsed, Bellamy was gone. They found him the next morning lying half a mile away, his face gray and twisted, eyes wide open. The doctor said it was a heart attack. Betsy Crow said otherwise. She said Annie had finally found her voice again, and he'd H. The official records list the Bellamy Plantation fire as accidental, caused by lightning, but that was only the beginning of the story. In the years that followed, every owner who tried to reclaim the land met some kind of misfortune. One drowned in his well. Another disappeared in the woods and was found months later, bones clean and clothes folded nearby. Locals said the land itself was cursed, that it belonged to the dead now. But buried in the courthouse archives of Abbeville, South Carolina, there's a forgotten entry, a handwritten letter dated March 1853 from a reverend named Samuel Trent. He claimed to have visited the plantation before it burned. His words, barely legible through the smudges of age, describe a scene that still chills historians. I heard the cries of a child from under the earth, and the earth moved like a beast beneath my feet. The letter was dismissed as superstition. Reverend Trent died soon after, found in his study, his face pressed against the open Bible, his fingernails torn. And then there were the stories from those who worked the land years later, freedmen and sharecroppers who didn't know its past. They spoke of a girl's laughter echoing through the trees, and of small footprints that appeared overnight in the soft mud, circling the old grave. Some even claimed to see her figure on foggy mornings, thin, barefoot, wearing the same burial dress she'd been laid to rest in. By the turn of the century, the locals had given her a name, the Whispering Girl of Carolina. Children dared each other to go near the field at dusk, and preachers warned their congregations not to tempt the restless ones. One old man, interviewed in the 1930s, said something that still makes historians uneasy. She wasn't haunting the land was haunting her. It wouldn't let her go. And when researchers tested the soil in the early 2000s, time has a strange way of protecting the living and punishing the forgotten. By the 1950s, most people in Greenwood County had never heard the name Bellamy. The plantation house was gone, the land swallowed by forest, and Annie's grave marked only by a single cracked stone. But the past has a pulse. It beats quietly until someone touches it. That summer, a group of university students came from Charleston to document local ghost stories. They were historians, not thrill seekers, and one of them, a young woman named Margaret Hill, had heard rumors of the girl who spoke after death. Locals laughed it off, but Margaret didn't. She found the story of Thomas Bellamy in county archives, along with the name Annie. She decided to visit the land herself. It was late August when they arrived, a century to the month after Annie's burial. The field was overgrown, silent except for the hum of insects. They set up their equipment, measuring sound, soil vibration, temperature, anything they could record. By midnight, the air turned unnaturally still. Margaret's audio recorder began to hiss. Then came a faint sound, 3 knocks, slow, rhythmic, from the direction of the oak stump. They thought it was an echo until one of the students, a boy named Calvin, placed his hand on the ground. He felt it, a vibration, like something moving just beneath the dirt. When they returned to the car, the recorder captured what they couldn't explain, a whisper, soft but clear. "Don't leave me here." Margaret sent the tape to the university, but it was never catalogued. A few months later, she stopped her research altogether. Her friends said she'd become obsessed, that she'd started seeing Annie's reflection in mirrors and windows. When she finally left South Carolina, she told a colleague something that still circulates among paranormal historians. "I think she's looking for her name." Years passed, and Annie's name slipped again into silence. But silence doesn't mean peace. In 1989, during a flood that tore through Greenwood County, part of the old Rosewood Hollow land was unearthed. Among the uprooted trees and broken stone, workers found fragments of wood, pieces of what looked like a coffin. Inside one of them was a scrap of fabric, woven from linen no longer made since the 1800s. And clinging to it was a rusted iron nail, bent inward, as if struck from the inside. The local paper ran a small story, historical find at former plantation site, but no one followed up. Until a week later, when a man named Earl Turner, who'd been part of the excavation team, went missing. His wife told police he'd started hearing noises at night, scratching beneath the floorboards. When officers searched his house, they found muddy handprints on the walls leading toward the attic. His body was never found. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the woods for months afterward, dim, flickering, like lanterns swaying in a slow procession. A local historian, curious about the connection, brought a team of paranormal investigators to document the site. Their audio picked up faint breathing, then the unmistakable sound of nails scratching wood. Every expert who has examined the recordings agrees. It's not an animal. It's too rhythmic, too human. Some believe Annie's spirit wasn't bound to the coffin but to the act itself. The terror of being buried alive, the betrayal of being silenced. That pain clings to the soil, generation after generation, as if history itself refuses to let go. One psychic who visited the site described something chilling. "It's not her voice you hear anymore. It's the echo of every scream that went unanswered on that land." To this day, the property remains empty. No one builds there. No one farms it. The ground grows nothing but wild grass. Today, if you drive through Greenwood County, you'll see nothing but trees and silence where the Bellamy Plantation once stood. No sign, no marker, no memory. At least not an official one. But the locals still cross themselves when they pass the old road. They still tell their children not to play near the creek after dark, because they know what history tried to bury. In 2008, a team of archivists from the University of South Carolina uncovered an unmarked ledger in a warehouse basement. Inside were lists of enslaved people owned by Thomas Bellamy, each name written, each one crossed out. But beside one entry, instead of a cross, there was a single word written in faded ink. Returned. No date, no explanation, just that one word. For historians, it's a mystery. For the people of Greenwood County, it's confirmation. They say Annie never left. When visitors come to the area, curious explorers, ghost hunters, or skeptics, they often leave with the same story. A sudden chill, a faint voice whispering their name. Some report waking in the night to the sound of knocking, 3 slow raps from somewhere inside their walls. It's not anger they feel in that presence. It's grief, old deep grief that never found a place to rest. Because the truth buried in that Carolina soil is not just one girl's tragedy. It's the sound of every life that ended unheard, every voice that history silenced. And maybe that's why people still hear her. Because some stories aren't meant to die. They claw their way out, again and again, demanding to be spoken. So if you ever find yourself driving through the lowlands of South Carolina, and the wind goes still for just a moment, listen, you might hear it too. A voice, soft as the soil that covers her grave, whispering from the past, "I'm still here." Because she is. And until her name is remembered, the knocking will never stop.